Let's talk about some of the main Syracuse football fall camp takeaways with Mike McAllister.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are joined by Mike McAllister from 24/7 Sports, going over Syracuse football fall camp takeaways, and of course, season expectations. And Mike, get ready, because I am going to ask you your record prediction, but that is later on for the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Ultimate GM. Ultimate College Football HC is a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. Thank you so much, Mike, for hopping onto the podcast on this Wednesday afternoon. Let's just cut right to the chase, Mike. Who is standing out at fall camp?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of the usual suspects, right? Kyle McCord is clearly heads and shoulders above everyone else at quarterback. He just has a level of experience and just his leadership, the way he carries himself, and on top of the physical traits, it's clear that he's the leader of the offense and everyone gravitates towards him. LeQuint Allen has looked excellent. I think Yasin Willis still looks like he's going to be a real contributor. Zeed Haynes, I think, is going to end up being the number one wide receiver this year. He just looks more explosive than the receivers they've had in quite some time. And defensively, Marlowe Wax looks excellent. Fadil Diggs looks like the real deal at defensive end. He just looks like a NFL caliber pass rusher. And they have a lot of talent in the secondary, a lot of talent. There's guys that aren't going to play that are really good. I think Devin Grant's length is really intriguing at corner. I was surprised when I originally found they were moving him to corner in the spring, just because he was, an All-American safety at Buffalo. So, I mean, he was really good there. They're moving him to corner. Obviously, you trust Fran Brown with his defensive back resume, but. And then, I look at a guy like Marcellus Barnes, who's a youngster, who's just extremely talented. I don't think he's going to start, but I think he's going to play. And, he's was a high school All-American, 4-star prospect, really, really, really talented player. So there's a lot of guys that have made their way so far in training camp.
So speaking of Marcellus Barnes that you just mentioned, because I've talked about him on the podcast and how true freshman, I'm usually very hesitant with true freshmen in football. Which freshmen do you think are going to have the biggest impact in year one for Syracuse?
I think he's one that has a chance to, simply because of, the talent that we've mentioned. But Yasin Willis is another one that I really like. I know I mentioned him before, but he just looks like he could be a bowling ball as a running back and just knocking people over and sort of your true power back, but he's faster than people think too. There's a reason why he was a highly coveted 4-star running back out of high school. He's very talented. And even though he's going to be behind LeQuint Allen, I think he's still going to get a decent amount of touches. And then someone else that I wonder, the Syracuse football Twitter account, or X account, I should say now, posted the speed of Malachi James at, remember what it was, 23.6 miles per hour, whatever he reached.
I don't know. It was something absurd.
It was insane. Whatever he reached during practice, which, by the way, for context, would be faster than anyone in the NFL last season, faster than anyone ran in an individual game, and is faster than Tyreek Hill has ever hit in an NFL game in his career. So, ridiculous speed. His 100-meter dash time in high school would have won the ACC championship this year. He's fast. So right. I wonder if you could see him. He's listed as a running back. He's obviously going to be behind LeQuint Allen and Yasin Willis, but could we see him on kick returns or punt returns, spelling Trevor Pena here and there? Do they want to maybe not have Pena do kick returns, just punt returns because of his injury history. They want to keep him healthy to play in the slot. So they put Malachi James out there more and more as a potential home run hitter as a returner. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. That intrigues me because of that speed. Those are three guys that I think I'm looking at right now as potential true freshman impact guys.
That was pretty similar to my list. Actually, I think it's spot on because I've said about Malachi James.
Great minds.
Great minds. Because Malachi James, like you said, he's so fast. All these guys, they're all fast. Like they're all fast human beings because they're playing Division I football. So a lot of them you'll see on their resumes, this guy ran track in high school and you're like, he has track speed. And I'm like, well, yeah, so does everyone else. They all run fast 40-yard dash times.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say about Malachi James, I'm like, no. Like that guy's actually like world class. Like he's freaking Usain Bolt out there. That's how fast this guy is. I actually plugged in his time into like a calculator to see what a 40-yard dash would look like. And I think it was like a 4.1, something absurd. And I was like, that can't be right. The math is not, no one runs a 4.1 40-yard dash. I've never seen that in my life. That is insane. I also agree with you on Yasin Willis because he's got not just college football size, he's got NFL size as a true freshman. And Barnes is the shocker to me. It's not that Barnes is not a talented kid, but because I believe they have a lot of players in that secondary, and he's a true freshman. And I know Deuce Chestnut a few years ago was a true freshman All-American, but it's not very common for true freshmen to break in right away. So that is certainly a pleasant surprise. You mentioned earlier about Zeed Haynes being the wide receiver 1 for this team. What are you hearing regarding who could be the wide receiver 2?
So I think, the assumption is that Justice Ross Simmons would be the other, starting wide receiver. I think with him, I know he dealt with some injuries a little bit last year. So to me, that depends on his health. If he's fully healthy, then yeah, I think he's going to be out there and he's going to see a lot of snaps. If he's not, and if he's even a little bit unhealthy, I wouldn't be surprised if you see Amari Hatcher getting a lot of snaps. And then the other guy that I really like is Daryl Gill. He played as a true freshman last year. I know under a different coaching staff, but I didn't really expect to see him much. And he was out there last year playing. And reports from spring ball were that he was one of the best wide receivers in the spring. And that has continued so far this training camp. So he's someone I don't think that gets talked about all that much, but I think could see his way onto the field and getting some snaps. I know Jackson Meeks coming in from Georgia. There's talk about him and what he can do. It's his last year of collegiate eligibility. So, the assumption is that he's going to come in and be one of those main guys. And I still think he's going to play. But, Amari Hatcher and Daryl Gill are certainly right there. And I think you're going to see them on the field quite a bit.
That's encouraging because at the end of the day, if the young guy is ready to play, you'd rather play the young guy than maybe a guy like Jackson Meeks who's been in college for a long time. Like, obviously, you want to play the player who's better, but if the young guy has the leg up, that's certainly good because you figure that a young guy can only get better in college. So, sandals, sunscreen, snacks for the kids. What do these have in common? You're probably buying a ton again this summer, but don't stress about the cost. Use Ibata and get cash back on all your purchases when you stock up on all your summer essentials. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibata user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata by using the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. College football is back, and it's not too late to catch up before the season kicks off. SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12. You can get it all from Locked On stable of college experts by subscribing to the Locked On College Football Podcast. Who has a chance to make the playoff? What teams will cause chaos in their new conferences? Everything you need to know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's good insight. Yeah. So Justice Ross Simmons, is he dealing with an injury right now at this moment, or is he good to go?
I don't know that. I don't know that either way, to be honest with you. I just, my thought is if he's not 100% fully healthy, maybe there's something lingering from last year. Maybe he tweaked something during training camp. I think, they wouldn't throw him out there just to throw him out there.
Right.
It could be something where they say, hey, let's rest a couple of weeks, get you really back to fully 100% and then go. That's something I could see them doing because I think they like their other options enough. It'd be one thing if the guys behind them, they said, man, we better hope that Justice can stay out there because these other guys just aren't to the same level. But because guys like Hatcher and Gill have had strong camps and they've got Meeks there as well with his experience he brings from Georgia, I think they feel pretty good that they wouldn't have to throw Justice out there if there was something going on.
All right, fair enough. So I think that's good for the wide receiver aspect. Obviously, now let's talk a little bit about quarterback because we got a battle going on. Of course, Kyle McCord in danger of losing the starting spot. No, I'm kidding. Of course. He's clearly the quarterback 1. Quarterback 2. So I recently heard that it seems like Jakari Williams has dropped out of the race. So is it fair to say that it's a 2-horse race right now between Michael Johnson Jr. and Carlos Del Rio Wilson?
Yeah, not too big of a surprise there just because he's a true freshman and not just a true freshman, but wasn't here during the spring, right? So, with Marcellus Barnes that we mentioned earlier, yeah, they've got a lot of talent in the secondary. The advantage he has is that he was here in the spring. So he got to go through that, get coached, learn the system, learn the playbook and all of that, which helps him when he gets to training camp and can get back to just letting his natural talent show itself. With, I completely lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Jakari Williams,
yes.
Yep.
Jakari Williams, with him, he didn't have the spring. So that puts him at a disadvantage in terms of, a guy like Carlos Del Rio Wilson. Whatever fans think of him, he's been here. He's been in college. He was at Florida. He's been in multiple systems, so it's a little easier. He's got that experience. He has the ability to learn the playbook a little bit quicker. The transition from high school to college is tough for anybody. It's most difficult at quarterback, in my opinion. Quarterback and offensive line, I think, are the two biggest ones. So yeah, him dropping out is not a huge surprise. And you got Michael Johnson Jr. who's come in as a transfer, and then you've got Carlos Del Rio Wilson. I think fans have pretty much cooled on Carlos Del Rio Wilson. I think there was a lot of excitement when he first got here, but they've seen him for a couple of years. He's had opportunities to start, hasn't blown them away, and a lot of fans are like, pretty much done with it. But the thing is, you've got different coaching, you got a different system, different style, and so sometimes it just takes that right combination for things to click. You can watch him throw the ball, and he's got a very strong arm. He throws a beautiful ball. There's no question about that. So can he put everything together? Michael Johnson Jr. is a little bit different type of a player. He can flat out run. He is a true dual threat. Coming out of high school, he was a 4-star prospect who a lot of people thought, had that potential to be a really dynamic quarterback that could run for 800 to 1,000 yards and then also throw for 2,000 to 3,000 yards. He had a lot of injuries at Penn State and Florida Atlantic that he dealt with. Now he's healthy, played a little bit at FAU last year, primarily as a running back, but he's taken command of the offense. He's looked good during camp, and I think the Syracuse coaches feel confident with him should they have to put him in. And because of his playmaking ability, his speed, his ability to run the ball, I don't think it would be too big of a shocker if they got into certain situations and threw him out there as kind of like a wildcat quarterback type of thing.
Interesting. That's very interesting. I never really thought about it from that perspective. That he could be used.
Think about how they announced him coming. Is when they put out the graphic that
he was a weapon,
an offensive weapon.
Yeah,
and so that has stuck with me. That I know he's a quarterback by trade, right? And I know Syracuse needs a quarterback, so him being in the backup quarterback battle makes sense. But the offensive weapon thing has just stuck in my mind. I'm like, are they going to like line him up in the slot and do a reverse pitch to him where he can then turn around and throw the ball? Are they going to line him up in the backfield next to Kyle McCord, and then you could do all sorts of things there? And I mean, nothing would really surprise me. And we don't know how creative, how risk averse or not risk averse these coaches are, because it's all new. We don't know how they're going to, call plays and attack game plans, et cetera. But I think he's a weapon that they could find ways to utilize this season.
Okay. So, because my thought has always been if they're going to go Wildcat, you would use Dan Villari.
Yeah,
Dan Villari would make perfect sense. You would have I guess you could have Villari and Michael Johnson back there. That would be very, very interesting to see what happens.
Options. You've got options.
Dare I say they do you don't know who's getting the ball off the snap? Like you just put Villari and Johnson in the shotgun next to each other, and you just don't know who's getting the ball?
Or split them next to Kyle McCord. And then you could do a direct snap to any of the three. I mean, the possibilities are endless. So let's let all of the teams that have to play Syracuse try to figure out if any of that's going to happen, because the more time that you have to spend thinking about that, the better it is for Syracuse and the coaching staff.
I'm going to have trouble figuring it out too, and I'm just going to be watching. Good thing I'm not an opposing defense who has to worry about it.
Right.
So, Mike, when you take a look at the roster, what do you think are some of the strengths of the team?
Well, I think wide receiver is really deep. I think their offensive skill position talent is excellent. Tight end might be the best, most deepest position, might be the best tight end group in the ACC, one of the best tight end groups in the country. You've got Dan Villari. We saw what he did last year when he was thrown in to be quarterback. But before that, he was playing pretty well at tight end before, they lost the only quarterback on the roster that could throw the ball, seemingly. So, and the way that he took over that role as the Wildcat quarterback and running the ball and all of that, I think it says a lot about him, his competitiveness, who he is as a football player. And he's your backup. And then the guy you've got starting in front of him was an All-American a couple years ago, All-ACC first-team guy. And so, yeah, I think that tight end group is incredibly deep. They've got a lot of skill position talent. Linebackers, I think, are really good. If they're going to be playing a lot of 4-2-5, that means you're going to have two linebackers out there on the field most of the time, which you would expect would be Marlowe Wax. And I think your other guy depends on certain situations, but Derek McDonald's going to be out there a lot. Anwar Sparrow's going to be out there a lot. Guys like Zion Moultrie-Goddard, we've seen some good things in the spring, and I think he's got an opportunity to play. They've got some talented freshmen that have come in. So, that I like the linebacker group as well. The secondary, as you mentioned, when I mentioned Marcellus Barnes, how much talent there is in the secondary. So, does he really have a chance to get in there because of how much talent? I think, a couple injuries and things like that have happened to help his case, but they've got a lot of options, and they're going to be playing 5 defensive backs most of the time. So I think basically everywhere other than the lines of scrimmage, you feel really good about the talent and the depth that Syracuse has.
Hey, Locked On Syracuse fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you are going to love as much as I do, Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of Syracuse? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? And here's what I really love about the game. You are responsible for calling offensive plays during the games. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your college football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC is completely free and has no ads and is 100% playable offline. You can play on the GO as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Syracuse fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com, ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. That's great, except for that final part that you just mentioned, which is the lines of scrimmage.
Yeah.
I'm going to say right off the bat that, because I had Neil Adler on last week from Inside the Loud House, and I said, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, at the end of the day with the offensive line, if the quarterback can get rid of the ball quickly, you can kind of mask any sort of issue or problem that an offensive line could have. I'm not saying that the line is weak or anything, but if your quarterback can get rid of the ball in 2 seconds, there's nothing you can do. I watched Tom Brady for 20 years do the same thing. I mean, you couldn't touch him and he's not fast. You couldn't touch him, right? So if McCord can get rid of the ball quickly, we're all good, right? We're all good.
Yes.
Defensive line, though. What's going on with the defensive line? We know Fidel Diggs. You're not underrating Fidel Diggs because you called him an NFL caliber talent. So finally, someone else is putting respect. Actually, I'm not surprised. The Syracuse people are putting respect on Fidel Diggs. Everyone else is underrating him for some reason, even though he's a 4-star transfer. What else is going on besides Fidel Diggs?
Well, so, I'll go back to offensive line. I think there's more quality players offensive line wise than what we've seen in the past. And so there's the potential for it to be a lot better. There's just a lot of questions that we don't know. As with a lot of the new guys that have come in, we just don't know how it's all going to gel together. So there's more questions there. Defensive line, I think I feel pretty good about the ends led by Diggs, but Dennis Jaquez last year before he got hurt looked really good. They got some young up-and-comers. I know Isaiah Hastings, the transfer from Alabama, has spent time both at tackle and end. But, they had the injury to Braylon Ingraham, which I think hurts what the expected rotation was going to be. But again, after that, there's just questions. There's guys like Elijah Fuentes-Cundiff who played a little bit last year, but didn't play a ton. And partially because of the system with the 3-3-5, they weren't playing 2 tackles. And we know that Darton got a bulk of the snaps. But then they've got guys like Deion Wilson, who's a transfer. We've got Michael Nwakocha, who's a junior college guy that's coming in. There's just a lot of guys who are transfers who haven't played a ton, transfers who played at a lower level, or guys who haven't played a ton here. And so because you don't have, look in the secondary, you've got the established Elijah Clark, Justin Barron, guys that are returning that have played and played well. Marlowe Wax at linebacker, Darren McDonald at linebacker. Running back, you've got LeQuint Allen who's played, and we saw how good he was last year. Every position, essentially, you can look at a few guys and say, I know what they are, and if they get even better, that puts them at potentially all ACC caliber player. You don't really have that on the interior of the defensive line, and so that's really where the question comes from. But, we'll see how it all plays out. I think if they can get 2 of those guys to really separate themselves as these are the clear starters, and then you get 1 or 2 guys behind them that can come rotate in, spell those guys, and still give you something, that with what they have throughout the rest of the defense, you feel pretty good about the whole group.
All right. I think it also helps, with the schedule, the way it broke for Syracuse this year. Yes. Aside from Miami, Miami's a team that, has a lot of bulk up front. That can give Syracuse a lot of problems there. Because that's often the separator between these elite programs and the programs striving to be better is the lines and the bulk that they have on the lines and the talent that they have on them. Miami, I think, can give Syracuse some problems there on the lines. But other than that, I look at the schedule and I'm like, I don't know who else is really sticking out. I know people say NC State's going to be good. I kind of want to see it to believe it. But other than that, with the lines, that's kind of all right, we're not playing Florida State defensive linemen or Clemson defensive linemen, teams that have, 2 to 3, even 4 NFL caliber players on there. So maybe that eases my concern a little bit. Mike, overall, what is your expectation for this season?
So I think you expect Syracuse to take a step forward from what they have been. And what they have been the last basically 3 years under Dino Babers is a team that is right around 500 and is, scratching and clawing to get to a bowl game by the end of the season. Now, we've seen flashes where they'd start 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, whatever it is, and you start setting your sights a little bit higher, and it doesn't pan out. But you're hoping that that's not really a question. The question isn't, can we figure out a way to get to a bowl game, but rather, how good of a bowl game can we get to? Because of what you mentioned with the schedule, where you don't have Florida State or Clemson, and a lot of the better teams that you're playing, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Miami, you're getting at home. Really, NC State's the big road game. Mm-hmm. Most of the rest of the top teams you're playing are at home, although I do think playing at Cal is going to be more challenging than what people think. So, you hope that with the talent they brought in, they have a legit quarterback, all of the transfers that have come in, the 4-star recruits, all of the hype, the schedule, that this is a year for Syracuse to win 8-9+ games and sort of say, hey, look, we're not just that 6-6 team anymore. That all of the stuff that Fran Brown has been talking about is realistic. It's what the actual goals are now. The goal isn't just hope to be 6-6, have your stadium 3/4 filled some of the time, and sort of, stay in mediocrity. If you take that giant step forward with everything that we've had happen this offseason, I think that's a good sign for what's to come for Syracuse football.
And finally, it's time to put you on the spot like I teased at the very beginning. Mike, what is your record prediction for Syracuse football?
Undefeated national champs. No, all right. I won't go that crazy.
Same here.
I won't go that crazy.
We're not losing.
So when I do a record prediction, I try to sort of find a happy medium between what I'm reading a lot of people say, what is the potential for the high end if everything breaks right, and what is realistic in that it's something Syracuse could get to, would be considered a good season, but also doesn't put unfair expectations on the team and the players. Because I think if everyone comes out here and says they're going to go 10-2, well, now if you go 10-2 or go 9-3, does someone view that and say that's a disappointment?
Yeah.
I don't think a 9-3 season at Syracuse should be viewed as a disappointment. I think a 9-3 season, if they go 9-3 this year, everyone should say that was a really good first year for Fran Brown. Really good. And some people will then worry about someone trying to poach him.
That's me. I already planted that seed. I was like, if they make the college football playoff, get ready.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if they make the playoff, then yes. But that's, again, a good problem that you want to have.
That's also what I said.
Let's get to the playoff, and then we'll figure everything else out from there. But so I've got them at 8-4 because I think 8-4 is very realistic. It gives you the opportunity to have a couple of slip-ups here and there in the schedule and get Syracuse off to a good start, has them the potential to be ranked at some point during the season or by the end of the season, and gets you to a good bowl game. And I think keeps the recruits that are committed, shows the recruits in the future classes that, hey, yeah, Syracuse is for real and turning a corner, but also doesn't put unrealistic, unfair expectations on the players and gives them room to realistically exceed that prediction. So I'm going with 8-4 as my official prediction, and I do think that it is realistic that they could exceed that.
I'm pretty much in the same boat as you. Great minds think alike, because I'm also at 8-4, and the way I described it is like almost like a box and whisker chart. Like if you ever took a stats class before, where I have this, there's two ends. There's obviously the national championship on one end and 0 wins on the other. And then there's this box. And the box in the middle for me is anywhere between 6 and 10 wins in the regular season. Yeah. So I split the difference and I call them 8. Like 6 wins is a disappointment, but is feasibly realistic if something were to go wrong. And 10 wins is also realistic if pretty much everything breaks their way. And then if you get out of that range of 6 and 10, then it's real extremes. Like did Kyle McCord, knock on wood, Aaron Rodgers suffered a season-ending injury in 4 plays. So, I'm scarred for life. But you get the idea. If something extreme happens on one end or extreme happens on the other end, like Kyle McCord plays like a Heisman candidate, then they can really exceed 10. So overall, I'm with you. 8-4 is my prediction. Mike, thank you so much for hopping on. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.